facebook.com slash make it plain. Please, man, please, sir, give us a look. I'd like to actually begin this morning, as we often do, with a clip courtesy of Media Matters. And first of all, of course, Angelo is with us, president of Media Matters. Angelo, hey, man, how are you? Good morning. Is Angelo up? Oh, no, he's a hold. There we go. There we can hear you now. Hey, Angelo, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hey, man, how are you this morning?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, too. So you all have found the clip that I think, pretty much sums it all up. So I just want people to, if they could, to take a listen to this. Am I up? Okay, so Brittany, if you could play this for us, here we go.
I think, Sean,
this is Geraldo.
First of all, as I have said before, Nixon never would have been forced to resign if you existed in your current state back in 1972, 73, 74.
Geraldo, I was literally 11 years old.
I know. It's too bad for Nixon because nobody like you existed then. I say that because I believe that our prime responsibility now is to unshackle the 45th president of the United States.
Angelo, I think Geraldo, I don't agree that it's his job to unshackle, but I think he's right. If you had Fox News around back in the day, things probably would have been different, wouldn't it? And I think that's one of the reasons Fox News came to be. Roger Ailes worked for Nixon.
That's exactly right. He worked for that's exactly right. One of the things that Roger Ailes, Fox News was in Roger Ailes' brain at the time that he was working for Nixon. The concept for an outlet like that was something that he genuinely believed you needed. And while he was working for Nixon, one of the things that he did as his sort of media guy was create these big sort of fabricated moments, right? These staged events that sort of felt like real things. So instead of having, the candidate with sort of this like random audience of people, they were actually actors, but when you're watching at home, it looks like look, it's a town hall. He's interacting with these people. But actually it's just basically, a staged event. And that's what Roger Ailes brought to the table then. And Fox News is one of the things that he had already sort of conceived of at the time. And he finally had the chance to execute that in the 90s.
Yeah.
But I agree. Regardless, if Fox News was around with Nixon, it would have been a very different thing because they would have been able to undermine all of the reporting around Watergate. Yeah.
It's literally scary. One of your senior fellows also in Media Matters, Matt Gertz, had submitted this, and I think this is also worth a listen as well. The Trump-Fox echo chamber, because this is important, and I'm going to make a larger point about this too.
The President of the United States spends hours of his day tweeting at the television. But here's the thing, Trump isn't coming up with his tweet ideas on his own. He's ripping a lot of them directly from Fox and Friends, the Fox News morning show that he watches almost every day, either live or on a slight delay. I've been comparing Trump's tweets with Fox's coverage almost every day since October 2017, and I can tell you that this Fox-Trump feedback loop is happening a lot more often than you'd think. Just look. When Fox reported on a House vote to renew a portion of the FISA Act, Trump tweeted 47 minutes later, undermining his own administration's position, complaining that the FISA Act may be the reason the Trump campaign was so badly surveilled. When Fox reported on Kim Jong-un's nuclear button, Trump tweeted 12 minutes later threatening nuclear war and bragging about his much bigger button. When Fox reported on the Uranium One conspiracy theory, Trump tweeted an hour and 10 minutes later, calling it, quote, the biggest story that fake media doesn't want to follow. When Fox reported on former Clinton aide Huma Abedin, Trump tweeted an hour and 24 minutes later, calling for her to be jailed. When Fox reported on NFL players kneeling in protest during the national anthem, Trump tweeted 38 minutes later bemoaning players' quote, total disrespect for our great country. The examples go
companies
on
that are giving bonuses to workers, raising their pay of their workers.
and on.
Build the wall and hire more agents for that particular area.
Where do you want the wall built?
And on.
To say, we will not have a DACA deal unless you get me full funding for this southern wall.
Think about that for a second. A man with unparalleled access to the most powerful intelligence apparatus in the world prefers to get his information from people who once tried to roast marshmallows like this.
You're really going to do that with your hands?
Yeah, you're right.
Not going to.
Upon further review, we're looking for a stick. No, not plastic. That's bad for the environment. Oh,
these two.
This is unnerving for obvious reasons, but there's a serious key problem here. Trump's tweets are newsworthy, so media will and should report on what he says. But the public relies on the news media for accurate and reliable information. When the network that has spent years serving as the propaganda arm of the Republican Party is dictating what the rest of the media covers, we're all in serious trouble.
That's courtesy of senior fellow Matt Gertz, the president of Media Matters, with us in the person of Angelo Carusone. I want to ask you a question about that, but first let me let you expound, if you like, Angelo, on what Matt has reported.
I think that the one thing that I would just add is that we know he is actually watching. So those, in the context of those tweets, when he was giving those examples, each of those days there are other tweets that lined up with Fox and Friends segments, ones that are much more random. So, he would wish a happy birthday to this sort of random celebrity or country music singer, and it just happened to overlap with the birthday greeting that was on the Fox News screen. Or his tweets contained direct quotes from chyrons on Fox and Friends. So when he was giving those examples, they were actually part of much larger tweets. So maybe of the 5 tweets he sent that morning, all 5 of them would have lined up exactly with Fox and Friends segments. So we are pretty confident that he was not just watching and tweeting and live tweeting, but that he was doing it from Fox and Friends.
Now, let's just unpack this for a minute, though. 18 minutes past the hour. At first, Fox wasn't in love with Donald Trump, were they?
No.
And he wasn't in love with them. I mean, it was a bit of a power struggle at one time. And he was a threat, in fact. In fact, if he had lost, his plan was to put Fox out of business. Right?
Yes. Basically, I mean, it was sort of this very convoluted, messy plan. There was a plan that he would have come back around on Fox. Now, Roger Ailes at that point had left. It was a mess. Yeah, basically, yeah. The idea was he was going to try to build up his own sort of like media apparatus. That was basically the plan. He thought there was an opportunity. He had already cleaved off a pretty significant portion of Fox's audience. So when he was battling with Fox News directly, at the time, the reason that he was able to get away with it is because he had done something that nobody else had done up until that point, which was capture a sizable chunk of the Fox News audience.
Right.
He did. And so when he challenged them, when he boycotted them for the 3 weeks in October of 2015, I mean, it was real. It was a real fight. And they did kind of break. I mean, he used that as effective leverage to get to Rupert Murdoch in particular, who at that point not only was dismissive of him, but was actively hostile toward him.
Yeah. There's no. So, but now, so is it a leap for me to say what I'm about to say? That the echo chamber, there's the echo chamber with Trump and Fox, but then there's the Fox viewer echo chamber, so that Trump and Fox can get together and say Comey should be fired because he mistreated Hillary Clinton one day. And then when this memo comes out, they can then say that Rosenstein and Mueller should be fired because they got a FISA warrant on the basis of opposition research in the form of a dossier that Hillary Clinton paid for. I mean, 2 total extremes, still obsessing over Hillary Clinton. But that's the echo chamber. How can you tell a whole millions of viewers one thing 1 minute and tell them something different the next minute, and they still buy it, Angelo? They
are hardwired to basically accept contradictions and inconsistencies as long as they're coming from a specific source. And in this case, that source is Fox. They're just hardwired to do that because their programming contains a ton of inconsistencies. It isn't just in this context, but
right.
they are just hardwired to accept that. And that to me is part of that makes this so challenging and difficult. The one thing that I would also add is there's one small piece when we think about Fox. It isn't purely, I think it's an echo chamber. I think one thing about the feedback loops is there are two really different roles happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of Fox and Friends, Trump is getting a lot of information from them, and they are sort of like creating that feedback loop. In the case of Hannity, though, it's a little bit different. He isn't really getting his information from Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
It's the other way around, actually. He is using Sean Hannity as a lead steer. And in crisis communications, a lead steer is someone or a media outlet or a source that you sort of use to go out there to inject something into the media conversation, and then the idea is that others will start to talk about it because it's been put out there. During the campaign, we saw that with the National Enquirer, when he was using the National Enquirer to sort of push all of those stories about Ted Cruz being, a philanderer, or the conspiracies that Ted Cruz's dad murdered JFK.
Right.
He was using the National Enquirer to get people to talk about it, and Hannity sort of does that for him. Hannity, it was just reported last night, although it's been pretty obvious up until then anyway, that him and Hannity talk regularly.
Yeah.
They've been in very, very close contact over this Nunes memo, and the strategy behind not just the revealing it, but like sort of teasing different pieces of it. So there is a small difference there. And so the reason why I bring that up in the context of your question is that one of the ways you get people one of the ways you sort of navigate some of those inconsistencies and contradictions is actually by being very intentional about your media, your strategy, or at least the roles that are played. And so having somebody like Hannity who can basically not just put stuff out there, but then kind of massage the contradictions, which is largely what he does. And we've seen that consistently, where Hannity is the one that sort of helps people understand why these two things that are seemingly in contradiction with each other, it's actually okay, and you can sort of balance that. He's the one that really helps do that, or at the very least, if he's not doing that, he's doing something so outrageously ridiculous that it's overcrowding it, like when he was pushing the Seth Rich conspiracies.
Right. And this again validates what the earlier clip we heard from Geraldo Rivera, ladies and gentlemen, that Hannity is doing this job for him. Those of you who are watching our live stream, I've got up on the screen now the story by the Media Matters staff. Sean Hannity has been advising Trump on Nunes memo. So this is outright coordination between the President of the United States and Sean Hannity to put forward this propaganda.
That's exactly right. And, on the flip side of that, then you have people like Alex Jones,
right,
who Donald Trump still talks to as well, who he is giving, who is feeding him ideas about conspiracies. I mean, the two things that really jump out to me that I go back to because they show just how much you can get in, how easy it is to get into Donald Trump's head, and how it then subsequently affects the conversation is, Alex Jones was pushing this idea that he had secret information about an assassination plot against Trump, and he was talking about it. He was saying he was talking to Trump about it on the phone, and before you know it, the Secret Service is meeting with Jones to sort of uncover and discover these things, which is bizarre. And then the second thing was Trump sent Mike Pompeo, who's the CIA director, to go and meet with a source that Alex Jones has been promoting, because he claimed this person was a former NSA official who's been largely disgraced and was fired, that he had secret knowledge about the DNC hacking, that he could prove that it was all just a Hillary Clinton conspiracy. And he forces the CIA director to go and meet with him to sort of investigate this Alex Jones conspiracy. So on the one hand, when he's tweeting out all this nonsense and he's sort of engaging in all these like Twitter machinations and he's chatting with Sean Hannity, he's also talking to people like Alex Jones and then making policy and diverting and exercising government resources on it. And simultaneously, it's helping shape his paranoid worldview because Jones is telling him all of these things that he is then absorbing And the last point that I would make there is, and where I think it all comes full circle, is you start to see an increase in an overlap in the conspiracy theories that Sean Hannity then starts to push into a larger audience, to the Fox audience. They start to track against the conspiracy theories that you see percolating in places like InfoWars. It's just that Hannity is promoting them in a more palpable and watered-down way so that they can appeal to a wider Fox News audience. And there's no doubt that the conduit between sort of that extreme, fringy, disconnected conspiracy theories and the broader narrative that's emerging within the Fox News audience is actually Trump, who is basically relaying these bizarre ideas to Hannity, who is functioning as sort of a messenger in the lead's ear. And since we know they communicate and coordinate so much, I mean, even Sean Spicer confirmed that you start to see the byproducts of that in the larger Fox News audience and echo chamber.
Well, and 25 minutes past the hour, 26 minutes, correction. Matt has also written a piece about this whole release the memo saga. It's a farce. It's crazy. But he writes in the headline, it's working. This is working for them, Angelo?
It depends. I mean, I think it's easy when you're not a part of that echo chamber. Of course, it's not working. One thing that if the strategy was to get the larger news media to pick up the narrative and to run with it, then it's not working. Because most people are calling it out for what it is at this point. Too much time they messed it up. I mean, they overreached. But within their own audience, yes, it is. It is working within their own audience. And here's the one piece of data point about that. You have this. You can track it in near real time from when the time the idea first percolates, gets pushed out there from fairly fringe right-wing media publications. Then you see a social media explosion around it, Donald Trump Jr., others, bots, other forms of manipulations. And then you start to see members of Congress going back on television across the board, including Fox News, but other cable news channels, to point out the fact that they've had so much social media chatter about this that it's only increasing the demand to get this memo out there. And the net effect, at least amongst that audience, that part of the bubble, is that this basically puts to rest, any idea that the dossier, any idea that the investigation is legitimate. And that's a problem. I mean, one of the things, it's a precursor to sort of next steps. How do you create a more palpable pushback, for things like firing McCabe? Or worse, as I think we'll likely see. You have to at least get your diehard supporters, truly on board with it. And so to that extent, it is working. And that's what scares me the most. I mean, we saw this during the campaign. I think we see this now in terms of governance. He operates along the 10% theory, which is that you just need 10% of the people to be truly, truly fervent and passionate. Mm-hmm. And with them, you can either bully, persuade, intimidate, or suppress any meaningful opposition. And I think so. To the extent that it's about ginning up your own audience and firming that up, it is at least working in that sense, and that does I find that very unsettling.
And it's scary because you and I always get into these meaning of life type questions. We're at a dangerous place, Angelo. I think, and we've been watching Fox for years and seeing their machinations for years. But I think I can see it more vividly and more crystallized today that those who watch Fox and promote Fox, this president and everybody else, and those viewers, are willing to live in an alternative universe altogether. So much so that if he went on the air today and Fox and Friends and everybody else, and he started tweeting that the sky is green, and it's an optical illusion that it's really blue, people would believe it. And I've never seen it quite this intense. I know it's always been there, but I've never seen it as intense as it is now. He has truly exploited that. Am I wrong about that? Am I overstating it?
Right. No, I don't think so.
And more than ever before? Am I right about that too?
completely 100%. It is a very different kind of engagement with the audience, and in part it's because it isn't universal through the Fox, through Fox News. One thing that's really, really apparent when you're watching is that parts of it have gotten really far out there. Like Fox and Friends, and Fox News has always been Fox News, but there was a through line between all of it. Most of it was lined up with just advancing a far right, but a consistent conservative political agenda based off of like the normal rules of the game, except they just lied a lot and were very, very effective at it. In this case, though, like parts of the programming are just fundamentally different than the rest of Fox News. I mean, Sean Hannity and Fox and Friends are basically an island onto themselves. They have just really lined up as part of the Fox echo chamber. Like, well, let's not forget, when was the last time you saw the chief of staff on TV or do an interview? It's been a damn long time. Maybe once last week. Other than that, it's been months. He goes on Brian Kilmeade's radio show a lot. Because that happens right after Fox and Friends. There is a real synergy between senior White House administration officials and parts of the Fox News, this sort of Fox News sort of extreme island. And then you have other pockets like Tucker Carlson, who's basically just taking his program and feeding and reading what is largely white nationalist ideology. Like, that's not like me just like taking a shot at him. I mean, that is true. Like, he's just basically tracking with the latest things that are happening on Daily Stormer. And so, yes, Fox is radically different. Their audience is willing to go much further than they've been willing to go before. At its core, it isn't even left-right politics anymore. It really is a question about, when you think about that they live in an alternative reality, that's right. And I think that alternative reality is fundamentally anti-democratic. That's what scares me. It's like they're not just opposing like liberals now. They really are willing to oppose the very idea of democracy. And that's why I think it's changed. That to me is the real marked shift, is that we are no longer talking about left-right politics. We're really talking about some pretty basic fundamentals about a democratic society and whether or not that's okay.
Yeah. Angelo, Carusone with us, and we've got to find somehow there's got to be a way to deprogram people at the end of all of this. Once all of this is over. I know. We've got to deprogram our society somehow. That's the thing that's very, very scary. Angelo, any updates before we go on what's going on? I know a lot of people are working, pulling advertisers, moving advertisers away from Breitbart.com. Any updates on that?
They're still plugging away. I mean, it's been pretty consistent in terms of the advertisers trickling away. I think that there's not that many blue chips left or big names left. I mean, they've really pulled away most of the big names. Their revenue is obviously down, and the Bannon stuff clearly affects their ability to project that. It's the same thing with the Hannity front. He's lost virtually all of his blue chip advertisers. His biggest advertisers now are unpaid ads and direct response. And so, in that case, we know that Fox is absorbing a financial loss. I mean, they're losing a little more than 20% of their advertising revenue for the network. Mm-hmm. That's how significant Hannity's advertiser losses have been. Mm-hmm. A fifth of their advertising revenue has dried up because of that. So, to me, that puts a hard number on just how much they are willing to go in terms of advancing this kind of political agenda, right? I mean, that is real money on the table. We're not talking about a couple bucks. 20% of Fox,
no joke.
Fox News' advertising revenue is a ton of money. And that's almost $100 million. And it's just evaporated. It's barely worth even a consideration on their part because of their larger relationship with the audience. And I feel like Breitbart was in a similar place where they didn't really care about the fact that they were losing money as much, although it hurt them. It limited their expansion plans because they had a billionaire backer. It's still unclear to me that person, the Mercers, are not just dumping more money into Breitbart, though. Other right-wing publications have gotten significant influxes in cash from other big billionaire backers, like Ben Shapiro's publication has sort of risen up. He's a former Breitbart senior editor who started his own gig. He's gotten $15 million in funding to sort of promote these new outlets. So I think I've seen big right-wing money move to some of these other outlets away from Breitbart.
Okay. Okay.
They're terrible, but at least they're not pushing like sort of the same racist ideology and notions that Breitbart was. So I think it's just stay the course.
Did you say the Mercers are still giving Breitbart money?
One of the but I haven't seen them any evidence that they put any new cash into it.
Okay.
So they're still connected now because of the Breitbart because Bannon out, but there's at least no indication at all in the last few weeks that they've put more money. And the way that you would look for that is you'd look for either some kind of technical adjustments, you would look for promotions of their brand in any meaningful way, you'd look for staff changes. Have they added staff? Have they added capacities? There's been no indication in any way that they have done that they've received any additional influx in resources that they could capitalize.
Angelo Carusone, President of Media Matters. Angelo, always good to talk to you, my friend. Okay.
Likewise.
All right, man. Enjoy your week.